I think Russian President Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping of China both are communicating, and I think personally they're going to make a joint attack. He's going to move on Ukraine, and I think shortly coming up in the next year, you're going to see Xi Jinping move on Taiwan. Hey, how's it going? My name is Afro Shabazz, and I'm making this video because really I want to warn the world just in case they don't already know. A lot of you know about the Russian war happening in Ukraine. Basically, Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine at a very specific time in history. And I want to give a little insight on why he's really doing it and why you should also expect this from Xi Jinping in China. I want you to understand that all wars throughout history are basically waged because of the attempt of a single man or a few men to basically leave a legacy. Now, obviously, there are other wars in history that happen because of very specific environments and structural changes, but a lot of wars basically are driven by man's ego to leave a legacy. Now, here's the thing. Vladimir Putin is getting older, and even though he could be in office for another 10, 15 years, the reality is he most likely won't. He knows he's getting older, and if the last act that's actually achievable in his next lifetime left over in his basically presidency would be taking Ukraine and bringing them back into the Russian Empire. Even though they had a treaty that basically said they recognized their sovereignty in the fall of the USSR, in reality, historically, he feels that they're basically part of Russia, and part of Russia's long-term goal, and always have been leading by Putin, is to achieve greatness and bring back the Soviet Union. Not really bring back the Soviet Union, but return to its former glory in the world. So as a last attempt, a last act, knowing that he won't be around forever, he knows this is the most achievable goal that will cement his legacy as one of the greatest leaders of Russian history. And so if you think about it, a man who's in his upward 50s or 60s, basically saying, I have to do one last thing to cement my legacy. And there's no better time than do it now. The U.S. presidency is probably the weakest it's ever been in history, with Joe Biden's leadership, with the vice president Kamala Harris, and then also with the side of basically Nancy Pelosi. You have a 78, 80-year-old man, and you have two females, and not to put anything against females, but visually, America looks weakest they've ever been in history. You throw that on top of a destabilized economy in the U.S., where we spent $10 to $15 trillion on a basically pandemic that didn't require to spend nowhere near that money. We're heading toward economic collapse and recession due to overspending, due to overreaction of a pandemic. Then if you look at the structural things that are changing in the world, the rest of the world is catching up. The internet has solidified a new paradigm in global geopolitics. More people all around the world, from third world countries to Western nations, are more informed than they have ever been before because of the new paradigm of the last 20 years of the internet. And what that means is countries do not look at America the same. Global economies are changing, technology is solidified and speeding up transactions, third world countries are developing at a rapid pace. Venture capitalists and private equity is branching out into these countries and starting to build infrastructure. And what that means is the reliance on America has changed. And also, when it comes to geopolitics, America's influence is waning all around the world. If I had to basically sum it up to one thing only, hands down, it's the internet. The internet. Information has been basically free-flowing for the last 20 years, and people are fundamentally more informed about issues, about realities, and what things really are. People do not fear America no more. They don't need their protection, and the world is rising. And as the world rises, America basically is going to lose its position as a hegemony. Why? Because if you look at it historically, 700 to 800 bases all around the world, you have limited and controlled media access, which means that they can control the narrative and act opposite of what's being presented. Now today, with the internet almost all around the planet, it's very, very hard to fool people and keep their heads in the sand, and these countries are rising up. Now back to the point at hand, Putin. He knows most likely he won't be around for another 10 years. He feels it in his bones, and he knows he has to strike now. This is the best opportunity he's probably going to get. And where we're at is at a paradigm shift. We're at a generational shift of leadership, where now the new paradigm of young leaders do not think like the old guard. This is another reason why Vladimir Putin needs to make his move on Ukraine to solidify his legacy now. Because what makes a man powerful is his influence with other countries, other leaders, and other people around the world. When Vladimir Putin starts looking over to the U.S., and then you have a younger, new generational president who no longer thinks like him, who no longer shares the same sentiments about the world like him, his power will basically be reduced. Same thing if you look at like a leader like Justin Trudeau. I'm not saying he's a great leader. He has a lot of downsides. However, he's of the next generation. And a lot of people, especially older presidents, don't actually like him. And they don't like him because basically he's thinking like a progressive new generation person. So if you think about that, now I'm about to bring in China and Xi Jinping. Same thing here. 10 to 15 years max, probably less. They know that from a basic genetic perspective that they're getting up in age and they have to make their move to solidify basically their presidency in history. And Xi Jinping knows the most achievable thing he can achieve in the next 10 years and probably less is the acquisition and the securitization of, that's not a word, the acquisition basically of Taiwan. I think Russian President Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping of China both are communicating, and I think personally they're going to make a joint attack. He's going to move on Ukraine, and I think shortly coming up in the next year, you're going to see Xi Jinping move on Taiwan. I think they're probably coordinating and doing it both at times to throw the axis of the UN off balance. If you think about it from a strategic perspective, in one of America's weakest moments, with the weakest leadership it has seen ever, with the economy that's probably heading to recession, this is the best time to strike. You have a guy like basically Putin who's going to move on Ukraine, and I think shortly after, simultaneously, you're going to see Xi Jinping of China move on Taiwan. Now it's going to force the UN and also to deal with two superpowers at once. And the best course of action then would be to let it happen and back down, because they can't take on two of the largest competitors in the world simultaneously. And that's where I think the strategic relationship, the dark alliance between Russia and China that's going to play out in the next few days. Today is basically March 2nd, 2022. Mark my words, this is going to happen. And I'm telling you right now, my name is Eric Shabazz, that it's going to happen. Because if you think about it from a strategic generational perspective, both men know these are the most achievable goals in their lifetime before they leave office. That's to solidify their legacy. That's Putin taking Ukraine, unifying a significant large swath of the country, going down in history as one of the greatest Russian oligarchs that's ever lived. Same thing with Xi Jinping. The most achievable thing within his lifetime that can expand the power and control and structure of their country would be to take Taiwan, given especially when its prominence of semiconductor manufacturing. And it's the most achievable goal, and they're going to achieve it now. They understand that there's a generational shift coming. China is going to have a generational shift where there's going to be younger leadership. Russia's going to transfer leadership in the next 10 years. And these men know that if they can strategically align their attacks on their goals simultaneously, it would put the UN and the rest of the world in a significantly difficult position dealing with both advancing nations simultaneously. Mark my words. I made this video, and I hope the right people see this, because they need to understand what's about to play out in the world. Thanks.